Welcome to the Hitmakers Room, where the stories behind the hits come to life. I'm Steve Owens, and every episode we sit down with producers, artists, engineers, songwriters, and music legends that have helped shape the soundtracks of our lives. From platinum records to breakthrough moments, you'll hear the stories, the lessons, and the conversations you won't find anywhere else. So grab your headphones. You're officially in the Hitmakers Room. Hi, I'm Steve Owens, your host, and today I'm going to be talking to RJ Cloud, and we're going to be finding out about his company, Cloud Microphones, and we're going to find out a little bit of the history behind him. RJ, tell me a little bit about the Cloudlifter. A lot of people are asking questions about that.
Sure. Well, essentially, the Cloudlifter, it gives you amplification and gain prior to going into your preamp. And what's really innovative and unique about it is it doesn't have capacitors in the audio path. And for that reason, it's able to give you what I call it like free gain. You get this beautiful gain from these ultra low noise JFET chips that Linear Systems makes, which, by the way, I have a little story about those chips in a moment. But you get this beautiful gain from these noise canceling JFET chips, and there's no capacitors in the circuit, so you're getting all of that prior to going into your preamp's input. Every preamplifier that has phantom power on it has capacitors on the input to block the DC voltage from going back into the circuit. So what the Cloudlifter does is it gives you this amazing amount of gain, about 25 decibels, which is pretty tremendous for most things. And it gives it to you before your signal gets altered by going through capacitors, because all capacitors have some amount of noise, some amount of distortion on a technical level. You know, of course, good ones have less, but it does have a character that it imparts upon the signal. So by getting a bigger signal up front before it reaches those capacitors, you're defeating the distortion and the noise that the preamp generates potentially at higher gain levels, and you're able to pull your gain way down from its upper register. Because when your gain is pegged to the upper end of your preamp, that's like the worst part of the gain range for a preamp. That last like 20% is where the frequency response kind of gets destroyed a little bit, and the noise floor creeps in, and you start to get the hiss and the white noise. And the whole thing was invented originally because we needed a nice gain stage for our ribbon microphones so that it would be compatible with modern interfaces. But then we sort of accidentally put it in this box and tried it out, and we were like, wait a minute, this is great for a lot of different mics. And it was sort of a side idea, and it came out and at the same time when we launched the company in 2009. And boy, it really took off, and of course became a staple for mics like the SM7B and the RE20 for voice work and other ribbons as well.
What inspired you to make the ribbon microphones?
So around 2006, I had a sort of a project studio in an office building. It was very small. I had 300 square feet, I believe, and just a booth and a little control area that I used as a live room. And Steven Sank moved in next door to me with his ribbon microphone repair business. So I started working with him and listening to a lot of the different RCA microphones, and the sound was just so inspiring. Like my first thought, the first time I really heard a ribbon microphone in a properly redone, a really nice RCA mic, it just floored me. I couldn't believe how much beauty and depth there was there, and it was so inspiring that we started buying up old mics and fixing them, because I needed more microphones like that in our studio, because I just discovering how good they were, I just needed them. I wanted them. So I didn't really have the budget to go out and buy a bunch of ribbon mics. So I just kind of used credit cards and got a bunch of broken ones, and we started fixing them up. We'd sell 3 and keep 1, that kind of thing, until I started. And then we always had them around, and we were using them for lots of things. And so I got familiar with probably at least hundreds of different models of vintage ribbon microphones, where you start to listen to the character and you start to compare them to others. The RCA 44A was like probably my very favorite because of the way the motor structure in that mic is so open. It just has a very nice natural top end. It's not a dark mic like you think of with a lot of ribbons. It has a lot of fullness all the way through the spectrum. And that was sort of the pinnacle for me of ribbon mics at that time. And so as we sort of went along, I said, maybe we should make our own mic here. And so I collaborated with Steven. We designed the first cloud mics, and we modeled them very much after that original RCA 44A, that era of 44s, which is quite different than the Bs and the BXs that came later, which the Bs and BXs maybe became more popular because they were made for a much longer period of time. But I just kind of really gravitated towards the A, and we sort of modeled the Cloudlifter after, we modeled the Cloud mic after the 44A, but with some mods where we removed more of the screening and stuff to open it up and really give it that beauty across the whole range.
How sensitive is a ribbon microphone these days? In the older days, you'd blow them out very easily. Could a rock star come in and really belt out a tune on it?
Absolutely. It's a lot more robust than you might think. Part of the thing with the ribbon microphones is that the vintage ones can be more susceptible to being damaged for a couple of different reasons. One reason is because the strength of the magnetics back then was so much less than what's available now. With modern magnetics, you can get a much stronger magnetic field, which is what is responsible for the level of output that you have from the microphone. So with weaker magnetics of the era from the 30s through the 60s and 70s, the ribbon had to be so close to the magnetic surface on the edges of the ribbon that, we're talking 5 to 6 thousandths of an inch, like very tight tolerances. And if you had a pressure wave that physically moved that ribbon enough, it could catch the sidewall of the magnetic structure and sort of twist. And that's how you stretch ribbons. And shorter ribbons and smaller size ribbons that have less width were more susceptible to that because they're just smaller and they're easier to damage. With the long style ribbon that we use, that's identical to the original 44A, you've got more mass there. So it's a lot more robust than people might believe or be familiar with. And with the modern magnetics being stronger, I put my tolerances closer to about 10 thousandths of an inch, which is still incredibly tight, but not so tight that a pressure wave is going to make the ribbon catch the sidewall and twist.
RJ, what's one album that changed your life and got you into the music business?
Oh, wow. There have been many. I really like Pink Floyd Metal, especially side 2, Echoes. I remember listening to that when I was a teenager and just being captivated by that.
If a teenage RJ could see you today, what would surprise him the most?
Probably how much weight I've gained. but besides that, I've always wanted to go out and do things in the world to try to make, my belief is that we should try to leave every day a little better than we found it, try to make the world a better place a little bit every day. And I never really imagined that I would be a manufacturer because I've been a musician my whole life. And I only really got into the manufacturing because I got so fascinated with the sound of the mics and I wanted to produce music. And just through wanting a good sound ourselves, we started building our own equipment. And eventually we got the idea to make the microphone company. So I think young RJ would be very surprised to see the success of the Cloudlifter, how many lives that's touched in its own way. Someone asked me what Grammy winning records have the Cloudlifter on it. And I said back to him, well, what Grammy winners don't have the Cloudlifter on them these days? Because it's just everywhere. It's so ubiquitous. It's used in so many ways. So I think that would be very surprising.
What artist or band shaped your music career as a kid?
Well, so my father, I grew up with my father, and he he was a Vietnam vet, so he listened to a lot of the Vietnam era rock and psychedelic rock, and everything from like Steely Dan to Creedence and just all the classic rock, Stones, Led Zeppelin. Like I heard all of that music growing up, and we had all the vinyls. My father would always go and buy vinyls. So And I was a typical latchkey kid in the 80s. So I'd come home and open up his vinyls and start listening to him before he got home from work. And I think Pink Floyd The Wall was very intense, listening to it as a kid on vinyl before my father came home from work. So I just Allman Brothers. I grew up in Georgia, had a lot of that Southern rock influence as well. The Eagles, so many different things.
Vinyl is starting to make a major impact in the music business right now. Do you plan on building a record collection?
I have some. They're not particularly convenient, but when you want to really have a sit down listen to something, it's a great experience. I still have the vinyl from my youth as well. Like when I grew up, my first vinyl, I believe, was Waylon and Willie. And I used to play that over and over again. Yeah, a little bit of country. I mean, I was more into rock, and then I was getting into that time. I think Quiet Riot was coming out. I started listening to that kind of stuff, and just all kinds of cool 80s music that I got. And I had a lot of singles as well. So I used to listen to the singles, and I was really into buying the singles and making my own mixtapes. And every summer I'd go up to Michigan for several years, where my grandmother lived in Detroit. And she was kind of in that downtown area, sort of maybe less than a couple of miles from Hitsville, USA, where that studio used to be, which was a museum in the 80s. And I think it still is. And I used to go there. I remember I got my first job there. My grandmother was a waitress, and I was a dishwasher there at like 12 years old. They paid me under the table. And then every day after lunch, I'd get off and I'd go down to Hitsville, USA, and I'd stare at the equipment and the microphones. And then I'd go home and I'd take all the singles and I'd make my own mixtapes, and I'd have two record players together. And I was doing that sort of DJ thing a little bit and experimenting with that. And that was the way I did my audio engineering, because I didn't really have a music setup then. I did play a couple instruments, but not well. It wasn't until later that I started getting into guitar. So recording actual vinyl and making mixtapes and making my own versions of songs and extended versions. And I was just kind of playing around with that kind of stuff, and just having that experience of being able to go to Detroit every summer for 2 or 3 summers and spend a lot of time at Hitsville, USA. It really shaped my thoughts about audio and music, and it inspired me to want to do this.
You've got a nickname, the Electric Roadman. What's the story behind that?
When I first came to Arizona, I came here because I just had a feeling I needed to come here. I started having like dreams that were very vivid about being in Arizona and being amongst the native people here and indigenous people. And it just was so powerful that I eventually just put my stuff in my truck and drove out here with like no money and a dream, and I came out here, and within a year or two, I started getting invited into these circles, and eventually it led me to a Native American named called Colton Kingfisher, and we just call him Kingfisher, or King for short. Kingfisher was a Northern Cheyenne. He's passed since many years ago, but I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with him and do ceremonies around the Native American church and the Sweat Lodge and different types of Vision Quest. We did Vision Quest. He put on Sundance ceremonies. My father even came to one of the Vision Quests. We did a Vision Quest with him. And then for a couple of years, I drove him around. One of the community people donated a Cadillac Escalade, and I took him all up the West Coast into Oregon and Montana, all the way back to his reservation in Montana. Eventually we picked up his son and took his son back to his reservation to get his son's tribal ID, because his son had just turned 18. And he collected instruments that they use in the ceremonies during those trips, because his dream was to put on a dance of renewal. The dance of renewal is kind of akin to like a ghost dance, a very rare type of sun dance. There's no piercing involved, but they paint, and there's different paints that the different groups in the ceremony, um, wear the paints during the 4 days. It's 4 days and four nights. And it opens with a medicine ceremony where they use the sacred medicine. And my mother came to that as well. So my whole family started getting involved because I spent so much time with Kingfisher and became a part of the community there. I used to do fire for them in the ceremonies, or I do there's a spot where the drummer does the drum, and they call him the drum chief and the fire chief, and you've got the road chief. So they call that a road man. And during that time that I spent with Kingfisher on the road, I was also kind of taking some time and doing accelerated college courses, and I was in jazz band at school, and I was in a couple of bands locally as well. So I'd go out and play these shows, and some of the melodies that I started to hear in the ceremonies would start to come out of my guitar. And so I asked him about it. So the whole reason the Electric Roadman is a thing is because I said to Kingfisher one day, I said, is it okay to play these melodies like with electric guitar and bars and stuff and making music? And his answer was so different than what any other elder might say. He was like, yeah, it's a great thing. Take the music to the people however you can. These are the melodies that will bless the world and help uplift, all of mankind and society and the earth. So that was sort of his viewpoint on it. And so I did that, and I kind of nicknamed him the Electric Roadman after that. So, and then we started writing songs around that. So I started writing all these songs during that time, and have been writing songs since even. And one of the songs is called Electric Roadman, and it was a song for him. And that's eventually turned into sort of a rock musical that I've been writing, and that we're getting to like the last third of, in terms of capturing it and so forth. And that's sort of the inspiration for it all, because but the roadman is the sort of a medicine man that puts on these ceremonies, a specific type. In his case, he was Northern Cheyenne, but I've known many from Navajo Nation as well as the local tribes here. And I've spent a great deal of time with some of the roadmen, and it just inspired me to write this set of songs. And I don't know what's more fitting for the musical than to call it the Electric Roadman, because of just what it's about, and the nature of blending electric instruments with these sort of themes of healing and self-discovery, and the medicine themes.
When you're starting the recording process, what comes first? The beats, the lyrics, the melody?
It's all three sometimes. And sometimes it's just pure magic and it comes out all at once. Oftentimes in the past, I would, come up with a riff or chord progression and start singing with it, and kind of come up with it all together. And then more recently, I've heard more songs like just driving down the road or something. I'll start humming a melody, and sometimes I'll write a melody or a chorus or something, and then I'll go back and put the music with it. So it's really been all of those things at different points in my career.
What advice would you give somebody just starting out in the business?
Well, of course, you have to be dedicated to what you do and practice and work on your craft and try to improve. And that's all a given. But I think one of the things that a lot of people might miss is you've got to really just be a good hang. If you're not a good hang, you're probably not going very far in this business. So just being able to be a good person to work with and flow, and be able to take input and output from people in a way that's not personal. You just learn how to flow. I think, sometimes I've met artists and musicians that are phenomenal at their instrument, but they're really terrible to be around. So, and I see that a lot of those people don't really go very far because their egos get in the way.
Where can people connect with you?
Sure. We're usually at the NAMM show in Anaheim. We will be at the AES show in October this year. At the AES is going to be in Nashville for the first time. And I don't know if it's ever been there, but it's certainly the first time since I've been doing this. And I think that's really awesome because we have a lot of good folks in Nashville, and I just don't get there often enough. So that's going to be a great event to catch us at. And I'm sure more events will come up on cloudmicrophones.com and as well as the bands playing shows and stuff at cloudpaintermusic.com and electricroadman.com.
RJ, thanks for being here today on the Hitmakers Room. And I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. From Hollywood to Nashville, from Platinum Records to tomorrow's biggest stars, the Hitmakers Room, every episode brings you exclusive conversations with the artists, producers, engineers, executives, and creative minds that shape today's music industry. Real stories, real advice, real hitmakers. Please subscribe and give us a like.